You're listening to Experience Imagination, a themed entertainment design podcast presented by Falcon's Creative Group. Every episode, we discuss a new topic with a panel of creative professionals. Hi, I'm Cecil McPurry, President and Chief Creative Officer of Falcons.
Welcome to another episode of Experience Imagination. I'm your moderator for this episode, Audrey DeLong. We have a lot of things to talk about today, but first, I want to welcome back a familiar guest, Cecil McPurry. Hi, Cecil.
Hi, how you doing?
We're good here. There's a lot to discuss on this topic, so we're going to talk about interactive theaters and their evolution through the years, but we'd love for you to set the stage for the conversation.
Sounds good. You know, the guests that we have could probably talk deeper into the historical journey of these interactive theaters. But for me, I think one of the key milestones that I can kind of reflect on was Captain EO at Disneyland. That was quite an experience. And I was, in elementary school when I first experienced it, but it was like so powerful. It was storytelling and it was musical and using animation with music, but the 3D component and the lighting effects, etc. If you look at the journey of 4D and interactive, it kind of goes back to that epicenter of Captain EO as being a major milestone. Mm-hmm. And so that one sticks out to me. And obviously there's a lot that's progressed from there. The 3D component, the 4D is the other motion seats as a component, and all the effects that kind of get added on top of that. We've had engagements with these kind of 4D seat systems in interventions at Disneyland for an AT&T experience, Webopolis. We did it for a traveling Hard Rock 50th anniversary of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with Hard Rock. That's our own personal journey, and then we've continued to progress to do Ben 10 at IMG Worlds of Adventure, where we actually try to elevate the experience with Kraftwerk's top-of-the-line 40 seats with 4 degrees of freedom, and added theatrical lighting and effects on the walls, and so it got more immersive. So things have progressed quite nicely to allow guests to be more immersed in story.
Well, that's great. Well, we're going to hear from a couple different people on this. David Schaefer at Falcons and Kevin Murphy at Kraftwerk. And then we'll be speaking with 2 of our interactive team members, David Consolo and Andreas Lacheret. So we're going to get over to them, but we'll circle back with you at the end, Cecil.
Sounds good. Thank you.
We're getting into our conversation now with David Schaefer, Vice President of Falcons Creative Group. Hey, David.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Kevin Murphy, who is the Director of Sales and Marketing at Kraftwerk Living Technologies. Welcome to the podcast, Kevin.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to first start with David introducing the relationship between Falcons and Kraftwerk.
Falcons and Kraftwerk have been collaborating for going on almost 2 decades now. I think it's been a really great collaboration where Kraftwerk brings the AV technology side and Falcons can contribute on the creative and media production side. And really when we're talking about, interactive theaters and many attractions for that matter, it is that key kind of combination of both the technology and creative that makes the amazing guest experience. So it is a key relationship and one that we're very proud of and have had a lot of success together.
The combination works so well. I mean, we like to think of ourselves as creative technologists. We don't actually do creative design or master planning or media production ourselves at all. We leave that to the experts. And that's where I think we gel so well with the team that you have over there in Orlando.
Yeah, when we come up with crazy ideas, Kraftwerk's the first people we call. And mm-hmm. Instead of, getting the, what are you guys talking about? You're crazy. We get the, yeah, that sounds cool. We'll figure it out.
Nice.
Sometimes we will actually say that.
Yeah.
There's usually always a way to achieve anything, but we're also very, very honest. We're hardware guys at Kraftwerk, myself. We are hardware guys. We know the technology, but I think we've got to get the storyline, the content right before we start to layer in the technology. But the technology allows you to do things now that you couldn't do many years ago.
So I wanted Kevin to speak a little bit about the real-time interaction with the seats and what you guys are implementing, and tell us a little bit about how that programming side works.
Kraftwerk has been involved in producing 4D special effects seats, motion seats, basically since early 2000 or so, I think I first came across, and have been evolving the seats. And now we have a very, very mature product that's really quite exciting in what it's capable of doing. And we've developed interfaces to Unity, Unreal, and so forth. where we can give you real-time control of every part of the motion. Traditionally, in the past, the effects were put in an array in front of the seat. So you had a range of nozzles and so forth in front of you. Now it's actually right beside you in the armrest. And it's very, very neat, much easier to maintain. And we have a series of effects in the seats, like seat vibration. We have neck blasts, where you blow little bits of air up your neck. Face blasts, where we put air right into your face. Poke effect, so that's in the back. Leg ticklers, great for spiders running through the theatre and so forth, where we tickle the legs. We have water spray. We have audio, of course, in the seats. And we have scent. So we can release different scents, very, very localized to your seat. And on top of that, we have lighting effects. So for a lot of theatres, we don't even need to put in extensive special effects within the whole theatre. A lot of it is actually self-contained in the seats.
Do you ever get a chance to sit in the audience and kind of like as a casual observer and just see how people are reacting to these special effects?
Oh, I've done it many a time. I love them. The only thing I'll say, just being generalised, you guys know what you're doing. A lot of people don't know what they're doing with 4D theatres. And I will be absolutely honest. In the marketplace, when you use the term 4D theatre, there are some poor experiences. But when you come across a few that are done really well, my God, they're fun. I mean, the look on people's faces, the smiles, it's real. And they forget where they are. They could be flying, they could be going for a virtual adventure, they could be doing, anything. A good 4D theatre is incredibly cost effective and really, really is fun.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I know there are theaters and experiences out there that are just throwing so much action and movement and effects at you just nonstop throughout the experience. So it just becomes overwhelming. There's no hierarchy, there's no importance, and the whole experience suffers because of it. And so what we look at is really kind of trying to choreograph the emotions throughout it. We want those peaks and valleys and those calming moments, because then when you do a big hit with an effect or something visual on screen, it just has that much more impact. And I think, to Kevin's point, that's exactly the case. The truly successful theaters out there are the ones that understand that dance and that arc to really kind of play with the audience's emotions and feelings and leading them on a journey. And I think it's something that is really important to us that we always try to strive for.
Well, special effects are tricks at the end of the day. I mean, they're called special effects for a very, very good reason. And you know what? In a good 4D theatre experience, you don't actually use the effects that much. The effect that's used once in a show can have a dramatic impact. People come out and say, oh, God, did you feel that at that? But, that's what you're looking for, rather than here we go again.
The fact that Kraftwerk has now embraced Unity and Unreal as part of their control system, Falcons as content providers and creative designers, that has just opened up this whole new world of opportunity for us. Because basically what that means is for groups of guests that are sitting in a theater, depending on what they do or how they engage, the seats themselves can actually move different from the bank of seats next to them. So not only does it create an experience that is more customizable, but it also creates an experience that is maybe more repeatable because it isn't the same every time.
Oh, it's totally unique experience in many respects. 4D seats, when they're driven carefully and smoothly, are wonderful. They don't have to be a nasty experience. If you've ever been to a bad 4D theatre, you will come off and your legs will be shaking and you'll feel like your spine has been put out of place. A carefully run and controlled 4D theatre with the right content is as smooth as it comes. It's a nice experience. You actually lie back and you enjoy it. So it does raise a few interesting challenges in terms of how you control that movement, but we can do it. We are doing it. We're working together on a project now, and we are going to do it.
People think that these are for theme parks. I mean, they might have it in their mind and they get the impression that this is only a theme park application, but what are some of the other venues and applications for a product like Onyx Theatre?
It extends to anywhere where you want to simulate or you want to entertain and even sometimes educate. I mean, let's face it, retail is an obvious one. Having theatres within retail settings, we know what's happening to retail. Certainly over here in Europe, it's going to be a mess when we come out of the pandemic. And having more experience within the retail place, when you're placemaking is going to help. And actually 4D theatres can fit into quite a lot of spaces and be very, very cost effective. That's one obvious place. Travel. And it's been done before, 4D theatres in travel environments where you either have a visitor experience or, you're waiting for a plane for a couple of hours and you have a visitor centre, or you have come and experience a flight over, that type of thing, whatever it can be. Science centres, museums, a good educational or experience environment using a 4D base and a good content and story. It can be absolutely wonderful. It extends out from there, virtually any environment.
The story is customizable, the experience, the footprint is customizable.
Yeah, exactly. The theater arrangement is so conducive to being flexible, to fitting in so many different environments. It's not heavy loading. It doesn't have an extreme ceiling height requirements. It doesn't have very heavy power requirements. I mean, it is something that is very adaptable and can go in truly almost any venue.
All right. Well, thank you, David, for joining.
Thank you so much.
And Kevin, we really appreciate it. Thanks.
Oh, thank you again for asking me. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Well, we are now here speaking with David Consolo, who is a senior interactive designer at Falcons, and Andreas Lacherette, who's an interactive artist. Welcome, guys.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Well, we're excited to get into this conversation about interactive theaters and what we're doing with interactive theaters. I know you guys have had a lot of impact on our progression, especially with Onyx Theater, which we'll talk about the specifics, the technical details. But first, let's start with you, Andreas. What interactive theaters did you enjoy as a kid and why?
It was a big deal when Busch Gardens Tampa got its first 4D theater.
Right.
And my parents, they had to go see it, and I didn't understand why. I was too young. Because Leslie Nielsen was starring in the film. So I just thought it was going to be a normal movie, and it was like zany and it had slapstick, and then we're getting blasted with air and shot in the face with water, and I was like, I am completely soaked. This is not what I was expecting.
Right.
So it was pretty fun, and that definitely opened my eyes to the possibilities of what that kind of attraction could provide. So it was pretty fun.
All right. Well, let's go over to Consolo. What about you?
Yeah, well, I've always been a Disney kid. I was born in Florida, and one of the ones that I remember was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It was a 4D theater, as well as Bug's Life, with all the different immersive features like the ticklers and sense and obviously the 3D aspect of it. That's what really makes it pop out. And it was revolutionary at the time, and it really inspired me as I grew up.
Let's talk about some of the top considerations when designing attractions that have that interactive element, that 4D element.
As opposed to a traditional video game, we have to think about the experience of one versus the many. Now that we have so many people in a room together, they are all seeing the action simultaneously. So we have to think the effects that might look cool in our heads, or explosions and lasers. When there's so many at once, we got to think about, okay, the art has to change, the effects have to change, and the information has to be legible for the guest. That's the most important part. It doesn't matter how cool it looks, the guest needs to know that they are affecting the environment and the story in some way.
Okay. Consolo, what do you think? What are general considerations when you're designing for an audience that has people of all ages in it?
I get to work on many aspects of these kinds of rides, and so I'm the kind of person that will not only make it fun, but also make it reliable. So when I make it fun, I look at it from a perspective of a guest. So when I'm sitting on the ride vehicle, I make the seats move in a specific way that I think is going to be fun and react well with the content and the media. And then on the back end, when I'm programming the systems, I also am thinking about the operator that's having to operate these rides. So in a way, I have to make it easy for them, so that if something doesn't run right, that they don't have to do much to be able to troubleshoot it. They can press one single button and basically fix the whole ride. Because if the operator can't do their job, the guest can't enjoy it. So those are the two considerations that I put in.
Yeah, that's a good point. We just publicly announced Onyx Theater, so this is a good opportunity to play a clip from the product overview video. Let's take a listen.
Get ready to go beyond the 4D cinema experience and turn your world into one massive multiplayer video game. Introducing Onyx Theater, a revolutionary interactive attraction that offers a whole new way to engage with virtual worlds.
Andreas, you wrote a blog about Onyx Theater, so you'll be able to provide insight into this next question. How do you design a system for a wide-ranging audience? Hardcore gamers, non-gamers, children, and everyone in between.
The layer that I like to kind of skim first is, can anyone enjoy this game from the beginning? And then for the hardcore gamers, you add that underlying current of mastery. You hear this in game design a lot, of easy to learn, difficult to master. That is the pinnacle of game design, because if anyone can pick up a controller or device, start playing that game and enjoy it and tell their friends that they had a good time, you've done your job right. But then you've done an even better job if the competitive people who are familiar with the systems in UI can delve really deep and kind of create new levels of play. So that's something that we're bringing to the interactive theater that we're working on now, is that we're making sure that your first experience will be just as good as your 20th experience. But then if you've done these experiences your whole life, the way that Console and I have, you see, oh, okay, there's something else here for me as well.
Yeah, and with Onyx Theater, there's a competitive mode and a cooperative mode.
Exactly.
So maybe walk us through, Andreas, a hypothetical situation for both of those.
Something that's really cool is that the user has agency, which means they can kind of choose their own outcome. So an example of this would be that at the very beginning of the ride, they can kind of choose a faction or a team, by aiming their device at something and clicking on the team they want to join. Mm-hmm. And then you'll see the seat light up as a new color. That's your team color. And then now our system can recognize, it doesn't matter if they're right next to each other or not, they can be peppered around the whole environment. Our system can recognize who's on, red team or blue team. And at the very end, you get your individual score, and then you can also see the team score as well. So red team did this well, blue team lost or whatever like that. And that's something that I think we were adamant to add onto this, because I've never seen it done before. We can dynamically change teams, and you're thinking about, oh, I need to help the team out now. It's not just about me. And then at the very end, you figure out, oh, I actually did really, really good. So it's like two levels of enjoyment, so to speak.
Yeah, my team won, but I'm the MVP.
Right, exactly.
So Consolo, I'm wondering, with Onyx Theater, you can pit groups against each other, and they don't even have to be in the same 4D theater. Is that true?
Yeah, no, that's exactly true. It's one of the benefits of this theater is that you're able to connect the two systems separately while running at the same time. So we have Theater 1 going through one specific ride profile, shooting one specific kind of enemy, and then we have the second theater shooting another kind of enemy on a different ride profile, but they can interact with each other, diverging paths and converging paths, being able to fight each other at certain points in a time. And really, at this scale, it hasn't really been done, and it's the magnitude is incredible.
There's so many things that come together. There's the storytelling aspect, then you have the interaction with the seats, and Andreas talked about, using the real-time game engine. All of this has to get woven together, and it has to be seamless. So kind of tell us how that marriage works.
Yeah. So, let's say, since our seats move, every time there's something on screen that dynamically happens, let's say you blast an enemy that causes a huge explosion, but only on the left side of the screen, the left side theater seats, they start moving in reaction to that explosion. In a normal baked sequence, that wouldn't happen. But since this is real time, the engine, the screen, the real-time aspect can actually directly influence the seats and affect them in ways that it wouldn't be possible before in a baked sequence.
As we mentioned before with diverging and converging paths, if the audience chooses to do something that's different, everything in the theater reacts to that. They can choose at any time to change it. We don't have to say, okay, at the 5-minute mark, something has to change. It can be, if the audience chooses to do something at the 3-minute mark, then everything will react to it. And that's where the narrative kind of really blends into this dynamic system.
Yeah, I mean, if you got soaked on a ride, it's not necessarily something that you did to cause that. It's just because the system did it to everybody at the same time. So that's kind of the difference here, is based on each individual user's input, they'll have a different reaction.
I remember the ticklers on all the 4D rides, and I hated them. So I knew that they would come up, and I would scoot away. So
everybody screams at the same time.
At the same time, exactly.
And now you just have one or two screaming. You're like, what are they screaming about?
Yeah, they'll never know. They'll always get hit by the ticklers because they'll never know when it's coming.
Right. I like that. So when you started working on Onyx Theater specifically, what were some of the things you had in mind that would set it apart, Andreas?
because of the way that we're tracking the system and how it functions in unison with the whole system, we can tell your orientation at any given time, which means that you can start doing stuff that feels a little more natural with the controls as well. Someone asked me, could you do a lasso? And I said, absolutely. You can move the controller like a lasso, latch onto something and pull yourself or pull the objects to you. And that's totally possible.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
With this system that we've designed, not only do we have where you're looking, but where the blaster is in positional space. And so it's a whole nother degree of freedom, basically, that unlocks a lot more potential as far as not only orientation recognition, but gesture recognition. Let's say we wanted to have wands or any different control methods, it doesn't have to be a blaster. Let's say a user does a certain gesture, like a triangle in the air or a circle. The theater will be able to recognize that and use that as an input.
We talked about player agency. So, Andreas, I know we've talked a lot of the tech speak, a lot of the tech geeks out there are going to get it, but for like the everyday guest who goes into a theme park not really knowing about what this technology is going to be able to give them, what is the takeaway for them? Like, how does it change their experience?
One of the things that makes video games so popular and such a big thing is that you feel like you're in control. You have this character, and everything the character does is the stuff that you dictate them to do. And because of that, the character is an extension of you. You know, you feel like you're the one who accomplished these things because technically you did. You get to do fantastical things and superhuman things, and it feels really satisfying. So that's something that we wanted to bring to the audience of this attraction for sure, is that when you're done, and during it as well, you feel like you've really accomplished something, and it's something that you can legitimately tell people about. You kind of cross-examine your experiences with each other. You start to realize that the things that I achieved are completely different than the things you've achieved, and it doesn't make them lesser, it just makes them completely different. But we're on the cusp of that kind of being a big movement in our industry, that when you're done with an experience, whatever it is, you have really carved out your path and your name in this place.
That's awesome. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Always good to talk to some of the brains behind what we're experimenting with here at Falcons, and for a product that's coming to a marketplace soon.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, we're back now with Cecil, and I thought that was really enlightening. What are your thoughts on some of the things that were discussed?
It's interesting hearing the interactive guys talk about this other layer that takes this experience to the next level.
Yeah.
Now, we're in the middle of it all, and we're introducing it to the marketplace, which is exciting. But, we've been involved with this for at least a couple of years of fleshing out and making sure that it's robust and the capabilities of it is going to be natural for people to engage with. So I feel strongly about how embrace is going to be from the industry.
Yeah, we have the seats downstairs in the
Yes.
X Lab, so we're getting the seats and testing it out. And whoa, I didn't expect it to move that way. That's
Exactly.
fun too.
It is so smooth. The fidelity is incredible.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you, Cecil, for wrapping everything up.
You bet.
I'd like to thank all of our guests, David Schaefer, Kevin Murphy, David Consolo, and Andreas Latourette. And of course, thank you to all of our listeners. We hope you're back with us next time.
Thank you for listening to Experience Imagination, a Falcons Creative Group production. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast and share with your friends. To keep up with our latest news, visit us on the web at falconscreativegroup.com and follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes, please email us at podcast@falconscreativegroup.com.